"You're terminated, Miss Barrett. Effective immediately." The words didn't echo, they detonated. Right there in the Marriott ballroom, between the salmon buffet and the branded stress balls nobody wanted. The CEO's voice slid through the PA like oil on wet tile. Smug, slithery, rehearsed. Elaine's question hadn't even finished echoing in the microphone when it happened. Could you clarify why the internal sustainability audit from Q3 2022 never appeared in the compliance report, even though legal confirmed its submission in? Boom. That's as far as she got. She hadn't yelled, hadn't grandstanded. Just raised her hand and calmly read off a question she'd been sitting on for months. That question had teeth, but so did Elaine, or at least she thought she used to. Now she stood frozen, holding a yellow legal pad like it might shield her from 1,000 blinking eyes, 1,000 murmuring mouths. Someone coughed. Someone laughed. Her stomach twisted. And let this serve as a reminder, the CEO oozed, eyes glittering under LED lights, that we welcome curiosity, but not disruption. The entire room had gone mannequin silent. Security didn't touch her, but they hovered. She moved stiffly, legs wooden, ears hot, past neatly folded napkins, past her director's stunned expression, past 2 interns recording the meeting on phones they pretended weren't filming. She walked out, one heel slipping slightly on the marble floor. For a heartbeat, she considered turning around, saying something, but her voice was somewhere beneath her shoes, crushed and forgotten. She hit the lobby. That's when she heard it, shoes behind her, purposeful, expensive, not security, Miss Barrett. She turned, slowly, automatically. It was him. Victor Maris. Man didn't do public. He barely spoke during investor calls. When he did, stock prices trembled. His net worth had a comma for each decade of her life. He stopped about a foot away. No tie, gray suit, eyes like cold coffee. "Could you," he asked softly, "repeat that question for me?" Elaine blinked. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Her brain, still spinning from the slap of sudden unemployment, tripped on its own logic. About the compliance record. Q3, the environmental audit. It was submitted, but Victor nodded once. No smile, no follow-up, just a nod like a gavel. Then he turned and walked straight back into that room like nothing had happened. And that's when she felt it. Flickering behind the embarrassment, behind the static in her ears, something. A pulse, a glimmer, not pride, not yet, but the opposite of defeat. The kind of flicker you feel right before the storm hits, and for the first time in hours, you don't run for cover. By the way, if you're still listening and not just folding laundry to this chaos, do me one tiny favor. Hit subscribe. I'm trying to hit 10,000 of you beautiful chaos lovers so I can keep exposing these corporate soap operas. Don't make me beg like HR at a harassment seminar. Elaine walked out of that hotel into a fogged-up October afternoon, jobless, scandalized, vaguely radioactive. She didn't even make it to her car before her work email deactivated mid-scroll. Just a soft authentication error and a spinning wheel of death. No warning, no "we'll be in touch." They weren't just done with her, they were trying to erase her. Elaine didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed, still in the blazer she'd worn to the shareholder meeting, staring at the bedroom wall like it owed her answers. Her laptop hummed softly in the dark, open Slack tab blinking not authorized, her corporate inbox frozen mid-refresh, and the last sent message to her boss left unread, like a ghost in the machine. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the CEO's smug little smirk, heard the way he bit off the word disruptive like she'd committed arson in a cathedral instead of asking a question about a missing audit report. By 3:12 a.m., she'd gone full doom spiral, resume ruined, career dead, LinkedIn tainted with a scarlet compliance witch mark. Her references, probably already briefed by legal. Her HR file, edited, sanitized, weaponized. Then came the ping. LinkedIn, new request, no profile picture. Name, Travis B. Headline, risk consultant, independent, no work history. One connection, her message, saw what they did to you. You were right. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Her first instinct was to delete it. Block the guy, earn it down, but something in her spine twitched. She clicked accept. The second she did, the profile vanished. User no longer exists. That's when her phone buzzed again. Different app this time. Duo two-factor authentication fail, then another. Her company portal, the one she used to download restricted compliance files during reviews, was suddenly inaccessible. She tried her alternate path, the old employee wiki. This account has been deactivated. A chill set in, deeper than unemployment. This wasn't just a cut and run. They were scrubbing her, systematically. Like she never existed. Like the files she worked on, the notes she left, the reports she filed, none of it had ever touched their servers. Except it had, and she knew where it had. Elaine shoved her laptop aside and pulled out the dusty Western Digital external drive she hadn't used since 2019. It still had the sticker from her old cube on it. Compliance. We notice SHT you don't. She plugged it in. A whir, a beep. Then folders bloomed onto the screen. Vendor Sustainability 2022 Temp Reporting Overrides Wellspring Project / Legal Review V3 Draft buried under layers of archival sludge was her paper trail. Not everything, but enough to remind her she wasn't crazy. That report had existed. She'd submitted it. She had the timestamp metadata to prove it. She started copying, organizing, labeling every weird carbon credit discrepancy, every unexplained override in the vendor rating algorithm, every time legal had said not our jurisdiction. She even found an old PDF of a Slack exchange where a junior analyst had asked, "Are we supposed to delete this?" And her manager replied with an upside-down face emoji. At 5:42 a.m., she poured herself black coffee from a chipped mug that read World's Okayest Analyst and stared at a growing folder named If I Go Down, You're Coming With Me. This wasn't damage control anymore. It was evidence. It was war prep. They hadn't just fired her. They were trying to turn her into vapor. But Elaine had something they didn't. A memory like a paper shredder and the receipts to match. The message didn't come through email. It came through Proton Mail. Subject line, "You don't know me, but I know that report." Elaine hesitated before opening it. Her fingers hovered, still smelling faintly of whatever anxiety sweat had soaked into her sleeves the night before. She clicked. "I used to be in internal audit. I left before the layoffs last year, voluntary, not NDOD. I saw your name in the metadata of a report that was deleted before it went to board review. Someone ordered it buried. You were right to ask about it." Attached was a single image, a heavily redacted screenshot of a file tree. At the bottom, a file name, envcomp wellspring sub q3 eb94 finealf 2. PDF. She didn't need a decoder ring to know what eb94 meant. Her employee ID, her. It was the exact report she had uploaded into the compliance system last year, the one she'd flagged to legal with a 2-line warning. Discrepancy in vendor carbon credits. Possible internal override. Please advise. She hadn't heard back until now. There was one visible timestamp in the image. The report had been marked as archived less than 48 hours after she submitted it. Not approved, not reviewed, archived. A digital term that meant, put this in a hole and pretend it never happened. She stared at the screen. Her heart was thudding, but her hands were calm now. Anger has a way of flattening the panic, boiling it into something sharper. She wrote back, "Do you have more?" No reply. Instead, 10 minutes later, she got a call from a number she recognized. Jared. They used to eat lunch in the second-floor cafeteria, trading passive-aggressive crossword hints and complaining about the air conditioning. He had been in logistics. Quiet, kind, definitely not the whistleblower type. He spoke low. "Look, I probably shouldn't be calling," he started, "but you need to know. HR's already putting things out there." Things, he paused, "that you were under a lot of stress, that you might have snapped, something about your behavior being erratic lately. Lisa, my manager, said the head of HR told her you'd been flagged a while ago for instability." Elaine didn't speak, couldn't. The rage was curling in her throat like smoke. "Oh," Jared added, "and they're implying you might have made the report up, that it didn't exist." She almost laughed. It came out like a bark. "Tell Lisa," Elaine said, voice tight as a rusted screw, "that the only unstable thing about me is how many damn copies I made of that report." She hung up before he could respond. The smear was happening fast, faster than she expected. They weren't just severing ties, they were torching the ground behind her so no one would follow. Mental health issues, that old playbook. Corporate gaslighting 101. She opened a new document, titled it Disinformation Tracking. Every call, every comment, every person who suddenly went quiet. She even screen-recorded Jared's voicemail, narrating it as she did. Tuesday, 8:13 a.m. Jared from Logistics confirms HR is spreading mental health rumors. Noted, if they wanted to paint her as unstable, she'd show them how organized crazy could get. The email from Proton Mail blinked again. "There are more of us. We're watching how they react. You're not alone." Elaine didn't smile. For the first time since walking out of that ballroom, she felt something just as dangerous. Fuel, 3 days. That's how long the silence lasted. Long enough for Elaine to second-guess everything. Long enough for the caffeine to stop working and the adrenaline to dry out into something bitter, like stale gum pressed into the underside of her thoughts. Victor Maris hadn't called. No texts, no lawyers, no cryptic nods passed through private LinkedIn messages or burner emails. Nothing. For all she knew, his quiet nod outside the ballroom was just an old man's reflex, polite concern for the crazy woman unraveling in front of a Hilton coat check. She began to fold in on herself. Maybe she had misread it. Maybe Victor was just doing the billionaire version of clapping for the weird kid in the school play. A gesture, empty and harmless. She was in the middle of labeling PDFs for a new backup folder. Evidence 3/redacted/ if they sue me. The call came in. Unknown number, Cleveland area code. She debated answering, then did, half out of instinct, half out of boredom. Elaine Barrett, a woman asked, crisp voice, fast but not rushed. Yes, this is Kayla Arment from the Daily Ledger. You've probably seen our name floating around the shareholder fallout. I haven't, Elaine lied. Well, I'll get to the point. Do you want to make a comment about your whistleblower status? Elaine froze. My what? We're running a piece. One of your major investors, Victor Maris, briefed us on the shareholder call. He didn't say much, but he called you, quote, an individual with moral clarity who raised questions the board refused to answer. Elaine's mouth went dry. Kayla kept going. He refused to go on record beyond that, but you're named. It's a soft name drop, but it's there. So, I'm asking, were you terminated in retaliation for whistleblowing? Elaine glanced at her wall. She taped sticky notes in a pattern that now looked less like an evidence board and more like an emotional breakdown in pastel. She stalled. Is that what you're going with? That I'm a whistleblower? Well, are you? That word. It sounded so clean, like something with a hotline and a handbook. Not like what she'd lived. Not like being locked out of servers at 2 a.m. Not like someone calling her unstable behind her back. Not like watching a report disappear into corporate airspace. But still, Victor said it, not her. He'd thrown her name into the storm, gently but intentionally. She hadn't imagined it. I guess that depends on how you define it, she said finally. Kayla chuckled. We'll take that as a pending comment. We're publishing tomorrow. Elaine hung up without saying goodbye. And now the silence meant something different. Victor had heard her. He had believed her. He didn't call because he didn't need to. He already put her in play. Now she was a piece on the board. Her phone buzzed again. Twitter notification. #moral clarity was trending locally. Another buzz, this time from Signal. Message from an unknown contact. They're scared now. Be smart. They'll try to spin it. Attached, a screenshot of a Slack message from a senior compliance officer at the company. Her name. A warning. A containment strategy. Elaine leaned back in her chair. This wasn't her fight anymore, not just hers. She was a symbol now, a vector. They were watching her. The company, the board, the investors, the press, and Victor. He was the one who made sure everyone had their eyes on her, not to protect her, to see what she'd do next. Elaine was halfway through her third rewatch of the same 3-minute clip from the shareholder meeting, her voice calm, steady, echoing into silence, right before the CEO butchered her name on the public termination, when it hit her. Not a revelation. A password. Cold Stack 192. It was a throwaway phrase she'd used back when the company transitioned its internal storage to an off-site server farm, one of those temporary archive systems that everyone promptly forgot existed once the new SAW compliance platform rolled in, and buried it all under layers of bells, whistles, and auto-deletes. She remembered. She hadn't touched that system in over 2 years, not since she used it to manually back up her notes from an energy compliance summit, because the internal project manager kept accidentally deleting documents that didn't align with the PR team's goals. She logged in. To her shock, the server was still live, outdated UI, clunky file trees, ugly font that screamed Windows XP nostalgia, but live, and inside, everything. Drafts of quarterly reports that were never published. Email chains where VPs debated whether carbon credits could be creatively forecasted based on projected offsets. A memo where legal literally wrote, if we don't acknowledge the discrepancy, technically it doesn't exist. Then came the jackpot, a deleted compliance summary for Q3, dated 6 months after Elaine's original report was archived. Someone had pulled her findings, stripped her name, reworded it into a soft warning that data synchronization issues made proper environmental review impossible that quarter. In other words, we lost the files, wink wink. They didn't bury the truth, they rebranded it. Elaine stared at her screen, every tab a new form of vindication and a new liability. This was no longer about one report. It was about a company-wide pattern of sanitizing noncompliance into marketing buzzwords. She zipped the files, labeled the folder, shareholder packet a confidential source 001. Then she created a burner email. Then she found the mailing list. The one her ex-colleague had once shown her, laughing, saying, "These rich bastards will open anything with the word divestiture in it." At 2:39 a.m., she hit send. Subject line, review immediately. Compliance concerns RGS Holdings. Then she waited. She didn't have to wait long. By 7:15 a.m., internal Slack at her former company lit up like a Christmas tree on lithium. Someone from IT leaked a screenshot. Why is the old cold stack server still up? Did anyone authorize the data dump? Delete the backups now. Then, who the hell sent this to the investors? The CEO wasn't tagged, but legal was. Then someone made the mistake of dropping the word whistleblower in the open channel. HR immediately purged the thread, not before another employee screenshotted it and DM'd Elaine from a burner Reddit account. "You're not alone." Elaine stared at the chaos from her safe distance. For the first time since this began, she wasn't reacting. She was orchestrating, and buried in the files she'd sent, the one slide she knew would trigger a deeper panic, was a line item flagged as adjusted offsets, vendor estimate only, referred to a third-party contractor that allegedly planted trees to offset shipping emissions. But in the real numbers, those trees didn't exist. The carbon credits were fictional. Elaine had only dropped one packet. She had 4 more, each with more teeth. And this time, she wasn't burning bridges. She was lighting them from both ends. Elaine barely had time to finish her cereal, dry, because milk felt too optimistic when the first message came in. Burner Proton Mail. Subject, "You're not the only one they erased." Inside, a scanned NDA, redacted signatures. A timestamp from the peak of last year's strategic downsizing initiative. The message underneath was short. Just, "I was in data audit. They paid me to leave and stay silent. Didn't say I had to forget. If you leak this, don't say my name. But keep swinging." Attached, a memo from the same internal compliance server Elaine had just raided, detailed temporary overrides of key financial flags during quarterly reporting, marked explicitly for internal audience only. Elaine leaned forward. The language was slippery, buried in jargon, but she could read it like sheet music. The override let them reclassify vendor reimbursements as carbon offsets in certain quarters. Translation: they were turning refund requests into eco-points. By the time she opened Signal, her heart was a drumline. Another message? No text, just a file upload. USB Financial Archive Final/EBC. Elaine recognized the initials before she even opened it. EBC equals Executive Blind Copy. She used to prepare EBCs during quarterly compliance reviews. They were not standard reports. They were curated, toned-down briefings sent only to the C-suite, sanitized for narrative clarity. This USB was different. It wasn't sanitized. Inside, spreadsheets tracking discretionary logistics allocations, which sounded harmless until she cross-referenced the vendors. Private jets, 5-star resorts, rental cars in cities with no corporate hubs, passenger lists labeled guest. One name caught her eye, Alyssa Barrett, the CEO's daughter. 3 trips to Lake Como, 1 to Bora Bora. All billed under vendor relations review. One line item even said organic catering, altitude-sourced menu. Elaine nearly choked on her spoon. By noon, a third message came through, encrypted voice. The kind of thing paranoid tech bros use before launching crypto startups or whistleblowing on 3-letter agencies. The voice was distorted but calm. "We met at the 23 ethics offsite. I was on the legal side. I kept quiet because I had kids in private school. But your archive file, that stirred the hive. The board is scrambling, and there's more. Look up AgriSure Transfer Memo V4. You'll know it when you see it. Also, nice touch with the packet title. Bold, then, click." Elaine opened a new doc. Incoming leads verified. She began organizing everything. Tagging evidence. Cross-linking terms. Her desktop looked like a prosecutor's fever dream. And still, the sentence from her first burner contact wouldn't leave her head. "You were right to ask about it." All of this because she asked one question. Fired a mid-level compliance analyst. They forgot she color-coded corruption. They forgot she saved everything. And now, her focus was blade sharp. No more doubt, no more whiplash. This wasn't about vindication anymore. It was about exposure. Because the thing about people like Elaine, they don't come for revenge. They come with receipts. The memo was a masterpiece of corporate spin, passive-aggressive prose wrapped in HR-scented perfume and printed on letterhead that probably cost more than Elaine's monthly rent. Subject: regarding recent media activity by former employee E. Barrett. It opened with a hollow throat clear, as you may have seen in recent headlines. Then it got nasty. Elaine was described as emotionally compromised, possibly acting out of personal grievance, and most cutting of all, showing patterns of unstable behavior during her final weeks of employment. No names were signed at the bottom, just Office of the CEO, but everyone knew who wrote it. The message was clear: discredit the messenger, smear the woman, call her emotional, irrational, vengeful. What the CEO didn't know, the memo leaked. Within 3 hours, screenshots were circulating on Reddit under the title, CEO gaslights ex-employee, gets ratioed. By the end of the day, it hit LinkedIn. Executives were liking and unliking it so fast it looked like a cardiac monitor. And then Victor Maris finally moved. Not publicly, not yet, but word came through a whisper chain Elaine had learned to trust. Victor had requested a private board session. Emergency topic: leadership credibility review. No agenda, no minutes, no PR team allowed in the room. Hours later, a scheduled press conference, one meant to unveil the company's new Sustainability Vision 2030, was quietly yanked from the website. No reason given, but the timing wasn't subtle. Elaine, meanwhile, had already prepared her final card, the one she swore she'd only play if they tried to drag her name through corporate mud. And oh, had they dragged. So now, she gave the internet a gift. The file drop was small, simple, a 3-page PDF. Subject line: RGS Logistics Disbursement Trail V1 inside. Payment transfers from a holding account in Delaware to a series of flagged offshore entities in St. Kitts and Nevis. Invoice records from RGS Logistics, a shell company with no employees, no office, no tax ID until 3 months after the first transfer. The final page: a signed approval chain including the CFO and the CEO. Elaine included no commentary, no preamble, just the documents, just the data. She uploaded it to a transparency watchdog forum under the username, Barrett was here. And then she walked away from her laptop and poured herself a drink she couldn't afford when she worked for them. Within 6 hours, it was all over. Reddit threads, Substacks, finance Twitter. Is RGS Logistics the new Enron? She wasn't wrong, she was just early. Victor Maris' silence, suddenly very loud. Twist wasn't that Elaine had been telling the truth. The twist was that her question, the one that got her fired, wasn't even the real scandal. It was just the doorway. They'd built the whole damn company on fake trees and funneled cash. Elaine didn't feel proud. She didn't feel victorious. She felt clear, because this wasn't about her anymore. It never really was. They tried to make her the story, the distraction, the scapegoat. But now the story had a heartbeat of its own. It was systemic. The boardroom at RGS's downtown tower wasn't designed for war. It was designed for theater. Walnut table, leather chairs, soft lighting that made everything look expensive and in control. But when Victor Maris walked in that morning, the mood shifted like a dropped scalpel. No assistant, no entourage. Just Victor and a manila folder tucked under his arm, like a doctor arriving to confirm the test results you already feared. Sat without waiting. No greetings, no banter. He slid the folder across the table and said simply, "This is the only question that matters." The chairman blinked. The CEO tried to speak. Victor raised a hand. No spin, no marketing language, no PR script. Just answer the question. The sheet inside was simple. One line, printed in 14-point calibri. Can you explain why the environmental compliance audit from Q3 2022, submitted by E. Barrett and confirmed as received by legal, was never included in board review documents or financial disclosures? No one moved. Victor tapped a single finger on the edge of the table. "If you can't answer this by end of day," he said flatly, "I will call for motion to suspend the CEO and CFO pending audit review. And I won't be the only one." He stood, smoothed his jacket. Then came the real gut punch. Another investor walked in. Then another, each holding a copy of the same single sheet. Not shouting, not grandstanding, just presence. The message was clear. This wasn't Victor going rogue. This was a coalition forming. Elaine, meanwhile, sat on her couch with a coffee ring bleeding into her favorite notebook, and a cat she didn't own curled up by her foot like some stray karma. She hadn't opened the blinds in 2 days, but the room was lit, partly by sunlight, mostly by the blue glow of incoming pings. Then came the knock. She opened the door to find a courier holding a manila envelope. "Elaine Barrett?" She nodded. He handed her the envelope and Speed walked away like it was radioactive. She opened it. "Cease and desist. Unauthorized disclosure, the letterhead was off-center. The body was written in boilerplate legalese, half of which was copied from a Google template. And the cherry on top, they spelled her name Elaine. She barked a laugh so loud the cat bolted under the couch. They were panicking. She could see it in the sloppiness, the recycled threats, the desperate theater of legal muscle without a working spell checker. She folded the letter once, then again, and slid it under her coffee mug as an impromptu coaster. Then she opened her laptop. A new file waited in her drafts. RGS response summary final brief for Victor. It wasn't just for him anymore. It was for every investor who'd stopped seeing dividends as answers. For every employee still quietly leaking her Slack screenshots. For every outsider now watching the story unfold like a slow-motion landslide. Elaine didn't feel rage. She felt precision. The storm was coming, but this was the moment just before. The air still, the sky wide, and in every corner of the tower, the question echoed like a countdown. Why was the report buried? Tick, tock, boom. Emergency shareholder meeting wasn't streamed on any official platform. No press passes. No glossy handouts or brand slogans projected behind smug executives sipping cucumber water. It was hosted in a plain beige conference room at a private financial firm. No windows, no cameras, just quiet men and women with controlling stakes and colder eyes. But one of them, one intern, one assistant, one somebody, leaked the feed. Elaine found the link tucked anonymously into her inbox at 9:57 a.m. Subject line, "If you're going to watch history, wear something comfy." She clicked, and there it was. Victor Maris, seated dead center at the U-shaped table, holding the same single sheet of paper he'd brought to the board meeting 3 days ago. The room stilled as he cleared his throat. He read the question word for word. "You explain why the environmental compliance audit from Q3 2022, submitted by E. Barrett and confirmed as received by legal, was never included in board review documents or financial disclosures." Silence. The CEO, suddenly very human in the face, licked his lips. One board member shifted. Another pretended to flip pages they'd already read. Then came a voice from the right side of the room. "I move to vote." Another followed. Seconded. Victor didn't smile, didn't flinch. "Motion is now active," he said. The feed zoomed out. The hands went up, slow at first, then all at once. Elaine's screen flickered with the digital echo of 1,000 consequences. She sat frozen, hand over her mouth, as the room voted, almost unanimously, to suspend the CEO and CFO effective immediately. Freeze all executive compensation until the audit was completed. Launch a full investigation into offshore transactions and false sustainability disclosures. Then came the final note. Victor stood, one more motion. Someone groaned. "Victor," he ignored it. "I move to establish a new independent ethics committee reporting directly to shareholders, with a rotating chair. First term will be handled by the only person in this room who had the guts to ask the right question." He turned, facing the camera. Elaine Barrett. Elaine dropped her coffee. He glitched. For a moment, the screen froze on the CEO's face, his expression folding in on itself like a soufflé struck by a sledgehammer. Mouth open, eyes vacant, everything crumbling. Victor sat back down. The room didn't erupt in applause. That's not how real power moves. It settled, like dust after demolition. Elaine stared at the screen. She hadn't asked to lead. She hadn't even asked to be remembered. She asked a question. And now she was the answer. Not a martyr, not a rebel, not even a hero. Just a woman who refused to shut up. And in a system built on silence, that was louder than anything. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.